And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple. Coming to us from the Bodana group, creators of the upcoming RPG Branch Riders, the one and only Jack Berkenstock Jr. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me on. It is rare that I get invited to a monastery, although as a Buddhist, I should probably expect it.
Probably. I have a very simple setup with how I keep things. Stay chill and don't touch my stash.
I will never violate such a rule. Oh. Absolutely, never, ever.
Oh. I mean, the last person who did ended up having to be stuck on yodeling duty.
Not bad at all.
Oh. But I suppose the traditional spot that I usually open these things with is the humble beginnings, in a sense. So with that in mind, I'd like you to walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Ooh. I've had variations on this question, never in this exact format. So I actually had what I would consider two introductions to role-playing, one being more cementing than the other. So my initial was one year, I forget even what year it was probably like 82, 83, somewhere around there. And my mom, had gotten a good tax return. She said, y'all can get anything you want, anything at all. And all my other friends were like, yeah, we'll get bikes, we'll get this, we'll get that. And I was like, hey, what's that red box over there? That looks pretty cool. I've heard some friends talking about this Dungeons & Dragons thing. So I bought the red box, didn't know anything about what I was doing. Ran some real kind of weird adventures and was kind of like, well, that was fun. And then years later, 1986, and I remember that especially because it was the year that this game was published. A friend of mine at the time introduced me to the Ghostbusters role-playing game, published in 1986 by West End Games.
So 1986, so that'd be a frightfully cheerful role-playing game.
Yes, not Ghostbusters International, which was 89, if I am remembering correctly. And I know that because the pride of my collection is I have a vintage original box set from the first game, and I have an unopened, still in its original 1989 shrink, Ghostbusters International, given to me by a very good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. But that was my first real experience into like making a character with some depth, and I'm a huge fan of the property. I've seen Ghostbusters well over 400 times. I can quote it back to front, so whenever we play, there are of course many quotes. But I guess what really threw me in was that it didn't really, beyond the mechanics, beyond the property, it really threw me of how simplistic the game was, which meant that you didn't get bogged down in a lot of mechanics, which is something that's kind of been like a leitmotif of my gaming history and my gaming practice. I just loved, you make a character in that game in like less than 5 minutes. And it's just an absolute great beer and pretzels kind of a game. That was funny without trying to be forcefully funny. So that was probably my RPG origin story. And then we played the character I played in there. We transitioned that character to being a Marvel superhero in the TSR Phase Rip. Then we started playing Shadowrun, and so in every campaign, and even in the final book of Branch Riders, there's a little Easter egg for all my good buddies. There is a Jonathan Tiberius Airedale III in that game, and that is the name of the character that I have been playing in one iteration or another ever since Ghostbusters, way back in '86.
Although if you're quoting Ghostbusters, I have to ask, why would you quote a gorilla in a beanie? Wait, wrong Ghostbusters.
Mildra, that is a sin in my temple. That would be a sin. But I'm visiting other temples, so
I had to make the joke because I can always.
Dropping a Tracy Filmation reference does not bother me in the slightest.
Mm-hmm.
I loved F Troop and Larry Storch, and I can't remember the other gentleman's name, who were in the live action Ghostbusters show.
Mm-hmm. Which
so.
it had its moments. The animated version was, well, it was 80s Filmation, and by that point Filmation was kind of on their way out.
Oh yeah, they were way past their Star Trek the Animated Series day and their He-Man time.
That and the fact that cartoon exists is the reason why when the Ghostbusters we know got made, it had to call itself the real Ghostbusters.
Yep.
Although that particular cartoon has its own case of taking a different show out, because that was the reason Jason the Wheeled Warriors ended early, because JMS was approached saying, "Hey, you want to write for Ghostbusters?" while he was writing for Jace.
Yeah. And it's pretty, hey, hold off on that, what are you calling it, Babylon 3 or whatever, just hold off on that. Work on this. Trust me, you'll get some good practice later on.
Mm-hmm. But
nice.
Now, with that in mind, with branch writers, what would some of the media that you'd consider big inspirations for it? What would be the appendix N, for a lack of a better word, for it?
Well, there's actually quite an expansive list of media, because one of the unique things about branch writers is that there are 8 distinct realms within the role-playing world. So, I guess you could say, it kind of inspired a little bit like, let's put GURPS into one book instead of 79, or kind of like a Torg, if, for those old school heads in the crowd. But so in one hand, we have an Old West realm, which is not your traditional Old West. It's not even like Borderlands, like the old weird Wild West or anything like that. It's basically our Borderlands setting is Old West, but instead of the blank canvas of Western expansionism, we decided to say, well, what if everybody in this realm was inspired to create artistically, to kind of fill in the blank canvas of the wild frontier and what lies out there. So that's just one realm. So you can draw from 310 to Yuma, Desperado, any of the old Clint Eastwood westerns, but you could just as comically reference Bugs Bunny cartoons, where it's like, all right, I'm giving you the count of 3 to draw, and so they had the kind of little jokes there. But we have 8 different genre-based realms. So we got our fantasy, we have steampunk, we have western, we have superhero, we have traditional post-apocalyptic sci-fi, we have zombie apocalypse. We also have youth dystopian fiction, and I'm trying to think if there's any that I forgot right now. Oh, and noir, 1940 setting. So actually, in each of the realm guide chapters and in the book, we do list some very well-known properties as inspiration. But I would guess, anyone that appreciates the idea of a multiverse. Well, I shouldn't even say multiverse. That's not totally accurate. All the 8 realms exist simultaneously in the same world, but they are separated from each other by a force that is meant to contain the villain of the game, which is called the Blight. And the Blight just seeks to break down the barriers between these worlds so it can spread mass chaos. And your job as a branch writer is to protect each of these realms from these incursions of the Blight, where they're just trying to start trouble to rip the barrier between the different realms. So, the fantasy folk don't know there's a steampunk realm there. Not that that isn't going to happen in an RPG adventure, but so I would say, as far as like what motivated it, anything from Demolition Man to old westerns to any grade of superhero tale that can be told, whether it's Invincibles or The Boys or old Marvel or DC or even like old Silver Age and Golden Age comics. That's another one of the cool things about the game, is that you can you could dial in what exactly you want out of these settings. We've just provided kind of a rough idea of, here's kind of what the realm is like, and here's some starter settings to get you going. But we really also have been impressed, even in playtests, with just a sheer amount of rampant creativity people have making these little worlds their own. So yeah, that's a tough question to answer. Mm-hmm. What exactly kind of inspired it? Because it's kind of, we wanted everybody to have a chance to have fun at the table, so you don't. Yeah, I like fantasy, kind of. I like sci-fi. I like noir. Find one game that'll take all of those people, from start to finish. That from the get-go, you can have a party of 5, and they're each from a different realm, but they're all working together, and all of their items, their magic, their techniques, their powers, all that stuff all work together with a very simple resolution mechanic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can certainly get that. And speaking of resolution mechanics, I've had a philosophy that I like to call all roads lead to Rome. Since I'd say since the 90s, there's been the concept of a primary unifying mechanic within different TTRPGs, and branching off from that. Hence all roads lead to Rome. What would be the Rome for branch riders? That core mechanic that everything springs from, in terms of resolution.
Well, the core resolution of branch riders is that you are never rolling more than 3 dice, and those 3 dice basically are a combination of what we call approaches, which are the attributes in the system, mm-hmm. and those are creative, forceful, knowledgeable, observant, and social. So that's your first die. That's pretty much like, what are you doing to solve the problem? What kind of, literally, what approach are you taking? Then you combine that with a technique, which is either a standard skill in any RPG, and what we call a gift, which is a special genre-themed power that you bring from one of your home realms. And it's themed not only to the general genre, so like, honestly, the Heights, the superhero realm, that was the easiest chapter of gifts to write, because they're all like, hey, what are some of the coolest superpowers that are out there, right? But you could also make your own, which is another aspect of the game. And then the third die is typically what we call a situation die, which is determined by your exposure meter, which is an exposure tracker. It's an actual device branch riders wear when they go on missions, but it also acts dually as a visible metric on the table. So it's an actual thing that while you're going on adventures, if basically it's how aware is the bad guy of your mission. So as things go bad, maybe you have a table of murder hobos, right? And they're drawing way too much attention to the party. That exposure is going to tick up pretty quickly. And as the number of exposure goes up, the die that is coded for your situation goes down. Now, the reason that's important is that when you roll your no more than 3 dice, any roll, and they're coded between D4 all the way up to a D12. So we don't use D20s.
The lonely D12 is now not so lonely.
Exactly. So in this, when you roll, any roll of a 4 or higher is considered a success. Our resolution system, this is whether you're defending, acting, doing special stuff, is if you roll 3 successes, that's a yes and result. You get what you want, plus a little bit of bonus something, depending on what the story is. The 2 successes is a simple yes. Hey, you get the thing you wanted to do. Awesome. A 1 is kind of a little bit of like similar to PBTA territory, where it's succeed at a cost or fail forward. So you either,
yes,
we call it a yes but or a no but. Mm-hmm. So you're either not getting it, but something cool, or yes, you're succeeding, but something bad happens.
Yeah.
And then 0 successes is a no and.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get what you want, and there's a complication. And we like that because in our system, then, there is never a null result where nothing happens as a result of the die, which does happen in a lot of RPGs where you go to roll and you fail, and it's like, well, okay, twiddle your thumbs until we get back around to you. We wanted, even from when you start with what your approach is going to be, that kind of tells you what interesting things may happen as a result of what your die resolution is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about defense rules like the Blight, they have powers, much like you have gifts, and those powers are called shots. So we wanted to kind of make it that you don't always get to decide how you would like to react to something. So in the game, the Blight may say, well, I want you to make a social integrity check. That's your social approach with an integrity skill. You still roll the same amount of dice, except for situations where there are 11 skills, you can only have 10 on your sheet. There's always something you're bad at. Mm-hmm. So the Blight may target your weakness, and you wind up only rolling 2 dice for your defense, which means the highest success count that you can get is a 2. So we wanted to use the same mechanics, so this way, like I say, if you're using laser guns versus swords versus acrobatics, athletics, it's all the same system. So you literally have one thing to guide you through the flow of play. We want to keep it simple.
Yeah, I can get it. Now, to kind of go further on with that, are there any extra effects if any die roll their minimum or maximum facing?
No. Like, there's no exploding die. It's pretty much, there are effects in terms of like what happens as a result of the die. Like some of the Blight powers, we don't use hit points in our system. We resolve any damage through what we call condition cards. So these are, as best as we were able to synthesize, like, in D&D and other kinds of systems, you'll have like you're poisoned, you're electrified, you have acid damage or whatever, and we were kind of like, all right, you're hurt. Like, that's really what they're like, without getting into mechanical accessibility, like, being very kind of excessive over the top, you're hurt, right? So we said, well, what might that mean? Okay, if I get hurt by getting shot in the leg or I get acid on my arm, well, I get a condition, which is what we call, there are basic and advanced conditions. And a basic condition says that when you are trying to do, in the case of hurt, like if my arm was hurt, if I'm trying to use that arm, my situation die will be a D4 regardless of what the tracker says. So it's like I am injured. Now, further, those cards are yellow for a basic, red for an advanced, and they sit on top of your character sheet. So as you look around the table, every player can kind of see how the team is doing at a glance. So you're like, man, we got a lot of red at the table. We better do something, and fast. But the other thing we found in playtests is we've actually made meta conversation legal. That in the game, I could literally say like, hey, how are you doing? Man, I'm hurt. I'm hurt bad. I'm wounded. And so using that terminology, it's much better than, hey, Mildred, how many hit points do you have? Because no one talks like that, like in a real role-playing kind of scenario. So that's kind of one of the things that we even wanted that narratively interpreted. So that hurt could mean you're physically hurt. It could mean that you are emotionally hurt. It could also mean that you maybe are socially hurt by like someone's words or someone's actions. So we wanted these cards to represent a wild array of things that could happen at the table, which is why, when we mostly talk about branch riders, it is a purely narrative-driven system. Everything about this game is made that it tells a compelling story. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers your question. Like, yeah, we don't have like exploding die, or if I roll like all 4s, so I barely made my 3 successes. Like, you can narratively interpret that however you want. Because we've had people who are like, wow, I got like the top roll on all my die on 3s. And you could very easily go, all right, make this an extra special cool. but we didn't put that in as a mechanic thing because we love seeing what people do with a very basic but far-reaching mechanic, and to kind of see where they take it.
Hmm. I can get that. Now, with that in mind, you mentioned gifts earlier. With
Yep.
given the fact that you're dealing with multiple different worlds with this system, is
Hmm.
gifts your way of taking things like magic or future tech or techniques or whatnot and putting them into one umbrella?
Yeah, very much so. We wanted to be that, a branch rider, any role playing game, you want to be the protagonist, right? You want to be the hero. You want to be awesome. Is pretty much like most of the goal of a role playing game. So we figured that if you're kind of coming from this realm, and the whole realm is surrounding a specific genre, and there's backstory to each of the worlds, so that they're realistic, believable worlds. We wanted the gifts to represent kind of that little piece of home that you bring with you, but then also because you're going and exploring other realms, we wanted those gifts to kind of feed into things like the exposure tracker, and that, if I'm coming from an old west realm and all of a sudden I'm in like a Crag's fantasy realm, right? It's going to look kind of weird when I'm doing old west tricks in a fantasy realm. Or two of our worlds even have anthro residents as their predominant species. The rails, which is we always like to say the Last of Us presented by Red Bull. I can explain that in more detail if you'd like.
Hmm.
But yeah, gifts are just this fun thing that we wanted to throw in, that they're thematic. But even with that, we wanted to make everything simple. There's no distance mechanics, there's no ranges. We also don't have like pages of like equipment and gun porn, so to speak. We basically kept the gift set. You can use it at 4 different levels. There's a free use, which doesn't require a die roll, and that is purely for flavor. So it's something that doesn't really affect this, like, what's going on in the
Cantrips.
situation. Yeah, exactly. Um, and when we did the 3 basic levels, so you can use a gift at a self ability, an other, or a world. So if you're using the power just on yourself to make yourself invisible, to heal yourself, or to buffer just yourself, that's one level of using your gift. If you use it for other, that means that you are kind of extending that quote unquote magic or that energy of the other realm further, and you're using it against one other person, or maybe two if it's close quarters. The trick with that is, now if I fail the roll, an interesting complication could be the blight or the enemy is like, whoa, that was kind of weird what you were doing there, buddy, and the exposure tracker goes up. This
Hmm.
is more important when we talk about the world level, which is pretty much like an area effect. It affects the location of your scene, what you're in. World powers automatically increase your exposure tracker by 1. So there's a risk to using these powers, and the payoff is probably going to be worth it because of what their effect is going to be.
Hmm.
So we thought, instead of, again, monkeying with ranges and maps and rulers and all that stuff, why don't we just kind of eyeball it, right? Which is what makes it more compelling, just kind of winging it. But even within that, there is like a level of strategy to the simplicity of the mechanics. Like, these are a lot of the things people have told us over the 3+ years that we've been playtesting before we decided to kickstart, has just been, people are like, I have so many options in this game, because we wrote in the book what a gift might look like. So there's some flavor text in there to, like, what would a self look like? What would another look like? But players are encouraged to go beyond what's in the book. If you find, I mean, how many different uses does Reed Richards have for his elasticity power?
Hmm.
Tons, right? Like, yeah, how long have they been in the comics? Since the 60s. So the idea of, if you pick that as a power, or any of the other gifts there, you have the ability to describe this really unique thing, but you have that simple rule of saying, well, you're using it on yourself, one or two other people, or a large group.
Hmm.
That way, we give players a lot of creative flexibility, but at the end of the day, you're still rolling 3 dice. you are still counting your successes as 4 or higher, and you're still narrating along that same resolution system. So keeping it simple, but not in any way not allowing it to be complex.
Mm-hmm. Now, given the variety that we're dealing with, and given that tier system that you mentioned with them, this brings up something that I've had plenty of discussions about that I think is very important when you have a wide net that is being cast, and that is the importance of guidance, because with that degree of freedom, it can create the risk of analysis paralysis if things like examples aren't given, or what the line is between the different tiers. Um, when it comes to guidance, whether it be through sample gifts or through explaining what tier the level of effect would be at, is that something that you're going to be having in the book?
Yes. We have kind of all of those different examples of what you said with guidance. That, one, we have all of the gifts in one chapter, so you can see multiple examples of different gifts and how they're reflected through that lens of the free through world kind of use. Also in the book, we define the difference between those areas, and we even give examples within the text. So there is a lot of guidance there, because one of the other cool things about branch riders I kind of alluded to is there is an entire chapter in the book, it's an appendix, which is, hey, we gave you a bunch of Legos, maybe you want to make your own Legos, right? Like maybe you want to make your own gifts, you want to make your own blight, you want to make your own powers for the blight. We literally break down, like, here's the anatomy of what all these elements are in the system, and here's guides as to how even we designed these things for the game to help the player further understand how to make their own. So yeah, I can more than comfortably say there is a lot of guidance presented in the book, and that's just the core rule book. Now, one other kind of secret about Branch Riders is, and I'm very clear when I say this, it is not a therapy game. Bodana, we use games for therapy and education, and part of our design ethos in the beginning was to design a game that would be more easily utilized by therapists or educators or even involved parents, which is one of the reasons why we went kind of simple. But we also knew that we wanted this game to stand on its own as a game on anybody's shelf that anybody could play, regardless of what your intention was. If it was for fun, we got you. If you're a therapist, we actually have written a facilitator's guide that is part of the Kickstarter as well, that also kind of extrapolates a lot of those dials that you can tune. So we often say that, like, the facilitator's guide and even the book, it's not going to teach someone how to do therapy, so don't worry. You're not buying a game that's like all puppies and rainbows and Mr. Rogers handshakes and stuff. Like, there's a lot in this that is all about just narrative role play. So yeah, we give a lot of guidance, because that's something we ran into very early. The whole idea, well, what do you mean I could do whatever I want? Well, you can combine any of your approaches with any of your skills, just as one example. So if I'm doing forceful as an approach, well, just ostensibly that could be I'm being aggressive. That could be I'm being forceful in terms of being assertive. I'm being confident. All of those synonyms for forceful, right? There are different ways to interpret that. So let's say I'm doing forceful art. Well, in the realms of the Borderland, the Old West art realm, that might be a role that I'm using to break down someone's psyche as an artist creative. Like I'm like critiquing their art harshly. Or it could mean I'm doing a chainsaw sculpture or graffiti art in our realm, the party, which is the young dystopian future. So I'm trying to like incense the police, causing an uproar with my art. So that would be an example of forceful art. So we give tons of examples when we talk about the skills, when we talk about the approaches, about even here's some examples of how this skill could be combined with every single one of the approaches. So we give many examples in the book. to guide it. Even experienced players are kind of like, wait a minute, but how do I use my skills? It's kind of up to you. Well, what do you mean? Just tell me what you want to do, and we'll find the proper combination. And we found that it takes people maybe 5 minutes of play to automatically go, wait a minute. So instead of paralysis analysis, we actually have achieved the idea of complete opposite, where people are looking at their skills going, what wild creations can I come up with here? Like, how can I combine this approach with these skills to do something really off the wall? And we even built GMs a fail-safe into the system, that we have a approach called creative that I mentioned earlier, and we have a skill called weird. So any GM knows the circumstance of, somebody suggests something that they want to do in the narrative, and you're just sitting there going, what the hell are they doing? Like, I don't know where to put this. Well, you now have a creative, it's pretty creative, and man, is it weird. So you just make a creative weird roll, and that covers even the bases that you don't think are normally covered. And because weird is different, we've even provided definitions about what weird might mean. Because you have a fantasy realm, high technology might be weird because they're used to magic. Versus a sci-fi realm, which is all high tech, magic is going to be weird. So we wanted, again, a lot of kind of, not to borrow too much from my buddy the doctor here, but very wibbly wobbly, which we found has given people a lot of creative freedom within the system, which is actually one of the biggest things that people walk away from really enjoying about it. They don't feel constrained. They feel more kind of like, wow, so I can find creative ways to combine this stuff. Yep, we don't even give hard definitions. Like tools is what we use for, like, it could be building a machine, breaking a machine, analyzing a machine. It could be using technology in another area or another realm, because it's tools. You're using some kind of tool, which also means it could be Stone Age tools, it could be future tools, it could be, modern day tools. We wanted to keep it general to inspire creative play.
Now, you mentioned earlier the exposure tracker, and the idea that is essentially a gauge of the tension, how much trouble the party is in, and whatnot. Is it a case where that thing can move up and down both ways?
Yes, absolutely. And it's for a couple different reasons. I mean, one, it's another way that we've kind of made meta conversation okay, because the branch rider wears it, so you can literally be at like an exposure level 7. There's only 10 grades on the scale, and you can literally ask the members of your party, dude, we're in exposure 8. What did you do? Like, what happened? So as you do those things, like the tension rises, but you can also do it the other way. If all of a sudden you defeat the lieutenant who's been following you, and he's not able to report back, or you've taken care of a mini boss or something like that, or you make like a really clutch maneuver, maybe you wipe someone's memory or something of that nature, you can also narratively move it back down the scale. And just like with everything else, there are multiple, like, here's some advice of like reasons you'd want to move it up, reasons you'd want to move it down. So again, the book provides a lot of guidance. It's going to be, I mean, don't quote me on this, please, but it should be roughly like a 250 or so page book. We have 9 realm chapters considering the headquarters, and each of those is about 15 to 16 pages with bad guys, locations, settings, people, events, etc. Not a ton of lore, but the predominant sections are players chapter, GM chapter, and the gifts chapter. And that's kind of your mechanical section, but each of those is pretty widely distributed with a lot of guidance.
Now, you mentioned earlier that each of the realms that you have in the book have a set of inspirations. So instead of going into the what each realm's lore is going to be, I'd like to play a little bit of word association. I'll list off the realms that are listed on the Kickstarter page, and ask you to give me the media that's certainly inspired it. It could be other RPGs, it could be video games, it could be film, it could be comics. There's nothing that's off the table on that regard. Think of it as Think of it as
Fun.
the best/worst Rorschach test you will take this week.
No, I have to say, Mildred, out of I've done a lot of podcast interviews lately. You are among my top 3 interviewers. I love. Well, now I'm buttering you up. Now we get to the tough questions, right? But no, you ask very very unique questions. You got me on the line here.
I did say that we do things a little differently around here. So,
Oh, you weren't kidding.
starting off, the Borderland.
310 to Yuma, High Noon. Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It's the Gene Hackman Western. Yeah, Outlaw Josie Wales, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Any classic Western.
So instead of just using the Good, the Bad, the Ugly, we may as well go with the whole shebang and throw in the entire Dollars trilogy.
Yeah, most definitely.
Would you also throw in the El Mariachi trilogy as well?
I am not familiar with that.
Started with El Mariachi.
Oh, El Mariachi. I'm sorry, I wasn't. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that could fit. You could even, with the creative aspect, you could probably even do like a Lone Wolf and Cub, Seven Samurai.
There is one weird one that I would recommend taking a look at. Although, if you watch it, make sure to watch it with subtitles, and that is Sukiyaki Western Django.
Oh, okay.
That was Takashi Miike's attempt at doing a Western, but because it's Takashi Miike and he is weird, he decided to do a Western that was mixing elements of the War of the Roses, The Tale of Benkei, and of course Django, even having a minigun in the third act.
Wow.
All the while having a bunch of Japanese actors trying to speak English.
This sounds like a movie that I have to watch before I die.
Though,
Yeah.
like I said, it's best to watch it with subtitles because some of the actors are better at it than others, even if some of the grammar is a little bit, but
Alright.
for some of them, the accent is going to be a bit of a problem.
Okay. I think I could power through it. I'm a huge Mystery Science Theater 3000 fan.
Yeah, I actually grew up near the old Paragon cable station, so I have a long history with MST3K.
Yeah, those are the old KTMAs.
Mm-hmm. Plus,
The old public access.
every time
Nice.
I see a forklift on a movie, I can't think of that. I have to think of that damn song.
Fugitive Alien Parts 1 and 2. They
Yep.
tried to
You're
kill him
killing
with
a
a
forklift. Huzzah! But
Rocky again.
it didn't exist. But next on the list, of course, would be the Burrows.
Yeah, the Burrows, I would say, is any of your good, like the Maltese Falcon, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, but I think the best one would probably be Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because as I said before, the Burrows is one of our anthro realms, and I've always loved noir settings, and I also love just they always used to just use animal explanations for everything anyway, this gorilla in a monkey suit walks up to me in a bar and he's roughing me up, that kind of. I'm like, all right, so it's an actual gorilla in a suit, so yeah, okay, yeah, you got what you want. But yeah, I'd say Who Framed Roger Rabbit or like Zootopia in another way could also be some good inspirations.
Yeah, I could see it. So next would be The Chain.
Oh man, as far as The Chain, I would say Pirates of the Caribbean would be great because this is, it's steampunk, so insert any steampunk anime here. But I would honestly say that the Pirates, because they do kind of a mix of, like weird technologies, but you could also throw in, I'm trying to think of a good media example that has the big opposing army force that has spawned a resistance. That would work as well.
I was about to say Firefly.
That could, I mean, not so much outer space, but the concept of like a ship of ne'er-do-wells just kind of going around finding trouble. Yeah,
Hmm.
that could easily exist in the chain.
Yeah. The the ma- and I will note when it comes to when it comes to steampunk. I've seen some people hyper focus on the steam part. Um, whenever, but I've used a broad category that I call tech punk for that general energy, so I don't have to have separate categories and separate folders for like diesel punk or biopunk because it's in that same ballpark, just using different types of technology.
Yeah, we don't get totally focused in on the steam aspect of steampunk. It's just there's a bunch of archipelago islands. Some are regular islands on the water, some are sky floating islands. The big hit is the bad guy found a way to weaponize blight energy.
Hmm.
They call it Tenebris. So it's a big army and a bunch of like mysterious people fighting for to act fast and
I
to
suppose I could
get.
also invoke the Pirates of Dark Water if you don't mind a deep cut.
Oh, no, very nice deep cut. Yeah, Pirates of Dark Water could definitely work as well. I was going to say Pirates of Penzance, but that's a little more musical.
It's a little more musical and a lot more whiskey tango foxtrot at times. Um,
Yes. Well, as a child of the 80s, I would definitely say the best pirate musical ever was the Pirate Movie with Christy McNichol.
yeah.
But
Um,
that's just.
mhm. So, and what and while I'm at it, I'd be remiss to some of my audience if I didn't bring up games like Septerra Core and Skies of Arcadia, because
Yeah, no, yeah, Skies of Arcadia would work.
I am one of those heretics who has no problem with with taking notes from video games for my tabletop gaming, or because of
Yeah, beg, borrow, and steal.
uh, yeah. So next would be the Crags.
Uh, Craig's, any 80s, fantasy movies like Sword and Sorcerer, Dungeons and Dragons, it's a fantasy realm.
Hmm.
So any, Ator, even Outlaw of Gore would probably work in the Crags, but it could even be like Willow, any of those kind of, your typical sword and sorcery kind of a
Yeah,
deal.
probably Conquest as well. Though I'm a bit hesitant to rewatch Conquest in preparation because Conquest was a trip. Like I've had to question whether or not I or the director was on something when it came to that movie. It's weird. Even by the standards of 80s fantasy, it is very very weird. Because
Oh yeah. And there's a lot of weird to go through in the 80s. I mean, again, going back on Mystery Science Theater and Riff Tracks, respectively, way too many. Hawk the Slayer immediately screams to mind as well.
yeah, and I know it would be tempting to invoke He-Man for this kind of thing, but no, I'm going Thundar the Barbarian.
Yes, I actually had the great pleasure of interviewing Buzz Dixon and Larry Hama for a convention. I was a moderator of a panel with those two gentlemen on it, and I was like, blew me away. I love Thundar.
Yeah,
It's one of my favorite cartoons of all time.
yeah. I've had to remind folk whenever they say that something is fantasy. I'm always that guy going. Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down? Because
Oh, absolutely.
fantasy is a wide net. Unless someone wants to try and say that Conan and Lord of the Rings are the same because they're both fantasy, which good luck making that argument. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna make it because I
No,
like
I will not climb on that hill. I won't even look at that hill.
Oh, if someone wants to die on that hell, I'll say, men, present arms.
Yeah, you cannot make that argument. Those are two totally different styles of
Yeah, but
fantasy.
when someone tries to use fantasy as a monolith, that's more or less what they're arguing. Um, but next on the list would be the Heights.
The Heights, Invincible, My Hero Academia, um, any, like I said, any Silver Age comic book, specifically like, yeah, any superhero comic book. It could be as clean, squeaky clean as you want, all the way to, if you wanted to do something that the boys level in this world, you could probably do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Um, and it's funny you brought up Silver Age, and when we're talking about weirdness, because you want to talk about weird. I refuse to believe that anybody who was writing comics in the Silver Age wasn't doing something.
Oh, they had to be early CIA experiment. Like that's MK Ultra type stuff, and they're probably given like early comic book art LSD while they're trying to figure out what it was. Yeah, there's a lot of wild out there.
Yeah, a lot of wild and a lot of cases of, again, whiskey, tango, foxtrot.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
then then again, let's not forget this was the era of having the world's greatest detective going around with a megaphone, going, "Where's the Joker?" Or Superman shooting rainbows from his fingertips.
Or having a lion head. It's another famous Superman. There's actually a whole Superman is a I don't know if you could swear on this podcast.
You swearing's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I believe the site is called supermanisadick.com, where it's literally every issue of Superman where like he drops Jimmy Olsen into the middle of the desert or like messes with Lois's mind. And it was all done during the same era of, like you said, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot
Mm-hmm.
kind of Superman stories. It's really a sight to behold.
Yeah, and it's like I said. I'm pretty sure there are at least two lines at some point. Um, but next would be the party.
Oh, wow. So the party is a little bit Demolition Man, a little bit Suburbia, a little bit like SLC Punks, Rock and Roll High School. If you want, it's one of my favorite settings. That it's all emotion is banned and outlawed. It could even be Johnny Mnemonic. Could even be done.
You
to
said
a
emotion
degree.
is banned and outlawed, and the first thing I think of is equilibrium.
Yes, actually, I think that's one of the examples we used in the book. And it's basically you have a bunch of, we call them heart wizards, that are basically like, man, you need to feel like, whether it's a Tabasco pepper in your mouth or all the way to like, these like crowd demonstrations, we have to feel the emotion no matter what it is. So it's very young adult dystopian fiction.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, it'd be perfect. It'd be perfect to you to invoke the rocker boys in from Cyberpunk.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, that would be a good one as well.
Uh,
I mean, it's not quite as tech heavy, but it's kind of up in the air as well. There's some tech in the world,
well,
but
that's why I
there's also
specifically invoked the rocker boy role from Cyberpunk 2020 Red V3. If you want to get desperate, nobody talks about V3. For
Yeah, wow. I remember having the original Cyberpunk book.
Mhm.
They talked about cyber psychosis, and I was always like, man, Shadowrun, how'd you forget that one? Like,
Well,
how'd you miss?
they had their
Yeah.
equivalent in the form of cyber zombie. You wear so much you run out of essence. Um,
Yeah, that is true.
but next on the list is the rails, and I have one entry that I have a guess at, but I'll save that for a bit later.
Sure. So the Rails is, I mean, it's part The Last of Us, but it's also again like Gleaming the Cube. It's kind of a weird one to mention, but it's anything BMX Bandits, Yeah, Gleaming the Cube is really like a good, like any old like Bones Brigade skate videos could easily take place there. Um, but it's not zombie apocalypse. It's basically a bunch of athletic obsessed. Like imagine if X Games ruled the world, and every town was nothing but competitions, athletics all over the place. They tried to make people better athletes by using animal DNA, which caused the Jews to get loose, literally, and it created feral, which are like animalistic zombie kind of creatures that chase after you. But the whole thing is now in the shadows of Jam Stadium, which is this cityscape complexes. So people are creating new sports to like keep their spirits uplifted, and everybody's still obsessed with athletics. So they create things like Scotch is probably my favorite mashup sport, where it's parkour hopscotch.
Hmm.
So you're like leaping from building to building, slapping numbers on walls and stuff. So it's yeah, that's probably the best way that I would describe that. What was your inclusion for this one?
Well, when you mentioned the sports aspect, as well as just that athletic culture, um, stuff that came to mind was stuff like Air Gear, Jet Set Radio,
Oh yeah.
um, its successor Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, as well as Lethal League, Bass
Okay.
Clash, which is somebody said let's mix basketball with mechs. uh,
Wow. Okay.
uh,
Yeah, I think we actually jokingly referred to basketball in it because of the mashups.
mhm,
Actually, another pet for me that again, this is for like your really older listeners there, and by older I mean like my age. There was a movie made in the early '80s called Animal Olympics,
mhm,
which was an animated feature starring like Billy Crystal, Gilda Radner, Harry Shearer doing voices.
mhm.
It's you have to watch it at least once in your life. It was trying to promote the 1980 Olympics,
Yeah,
but yeah, that
same
would
the
work
same
as well.
Olympics that caused McDonald's to have the worst year of their lives,
Yep,
As
absolutely.
well as NBC blowing a bunch of money by outbidding in a year that the U.S. boycotted the Olympics, and then 4 years
Yep.
later Russia boycotts it, and McDonald's makes the terrible mistake of if we will give a free Big Mac every time a U.S. athlete wins a gold medal. Well, this happens to be the
Yeah.
year where their biggest rival didn't show up, so they pretty much ransacked the whole thing,
Yeah.
which led
It
to
was yep.
a rumor, and no one, I don't think anyone will ever know if this was true, but there was this urban legend that the CEO at the time had spat in every 50th Big Mac. I
Wow.
don't think that actually happened, but I'd imagine the
That would be
temptation
hard to
was
pull
there.
off. Yeah, that would be hard to pull off logistically alone.
I'd imagine he'd probably considered it, given how much money he was losing.
Yeah.
Oh, but no, one of the ones I was thinking of before you brought up the whole athletic thing was the biker mice from Mars.
Ooh. Yeah, that could work. There's also a lot of Fallout vibes
Hmm.
in it as well because it's our future. It's a wasteland. They just kind of perceive it a little bit differently.
Yeah, our future is a wasteland, also known as Nevada or Australia.
Well done.
I mean, everything in Australia wants to kill you already. Some of it can't kill you; it just wants to. Like one of the deadliest spiders over there, I learned recently, its fangs can't get past human skin. So,
Thank goodness.
uh, like I said, everything wants to kill you. Some of it just can't. But the last on the list is the terminal.
Yeah, the terminal, probably on its surface, the scenes from the Terminator and
Hmm.
Terminator franchise about what the future looks like. But I would also say, and I'm again, it's a little late on post Origin, so forgive me. But it's also very much that like information is very precious because there's a rogue AI
Hmm.
that is trying to disseminate, truth from fake information in their intranet system. So yeah, you could probably also mix some of those like Johnny Mnemonic, maybe a little bit of Equilibrium, uh, kind of idea in there. But it's
I'd
yeah,
probably
pretty
also go
much.
with Marathon.
I don't think I've ever seen. Do you mean the video game
Yeah,
franchise or? Okay, I could see that as well.
the
Yeah,
first two marathons, not Infinity, because Infinity gets, even after all these years, I still don't fully grasp what Infinity was trying to do.
I never played that one. I only got up to Marathon 2.
Oh, unfortunately, because of Aleph One, all three of the marathon games are free nowadays. Infinity originally was going to be a expansion to Marathon Two, that was developed by a different group called Double Aught, and then morphed into its own thing. Um, and it really shows that it was meant to be an expansion because it is Marathon's equivalent to Plutonia. You know, the Plutonia
Oh,
experiment from Final Doom.
wow. Okay, that's taking me back.
You know, the
Wow.
the reason why no one trusts the Casali brothers with any kind of closet. I mean,
Wow.
I like the Plutonia experiment, but I also recognize that it is a bit of a dick, and they did not try and hide the fact. In fact, one of the brothers had outright said in an interview with Doomworld, "I don't have a lot of sympathy for anyone who picks up the Plutonia experiment on ultraviolence and then complains that it's too hard. It was meant for people looking for a new challenge."
Nice.
Like
Yeah,
I,
that
I
that
can
would work.
respect that kind of thing. Of I made this thing hard because to give people a challenge. Deal with it. Oh,
Yeah, you wanted it to be challenging, so don't complain when you get what you wish for.
well, people learned that the hard people. Gygax's playtesters learned that the hard way when Tomb of Horrors became a thing. Oh, that's also the reason I keep telling all of my players never ever tempt the gods of irony because they will come knocking.
Nice.
You've no doubt had more than one occasion where somebody's like, "Oh, this roll's gonna be easy. I'll get this one," and they don't, or or how they feel luck is on their side, and it really, well, luck was on their side. Just what kind of luck is another story. But now, given all of that, um, we talked a fair bit on the player facing end of things, but on the side of things, do you have particular advice sections for GMs who want to make their own particular adversaries?
Yes. There's in that section I referenced earlier, there is a complete section in there on how to make your own blight, which are the enemies. So there's advice in there on how to stat them, because the way we designed the blight was that you have your hero with their approaches and gifts. Well, the blight has what we call methods, which are kind of the antithesis of the approach. So if a branch rider is forceful, a blight is brutal. And what we did was we designed the powers around those terms. So there are like a list of brutal powers. There's a list of deceptive based powers. Um, so we give a lot of advice in the book, because really the GM's job is to help the players tell a good story. GM doesn't roll dice in our system. You interpret the dice, or you guide the player to interpret the dice. So it's really just about creating creative opposition to, pardon me, to allow the players to be more heroic in their story. Not only do we give advice on creating your own enemies and powers and gifts and all that good stuff, there's also an entire section um, in the back that is questions that you can ask about the particular realms to create your own locations, which are where the adventures take place. So, for example, in the Heights, our superhero realm, we have Capedonia.
Mm-hmm.
And Capedonia is a city in which every citizen has a superpower. Now, not everyone gets laser beams and Hulk strength. Some people, and I make this joke, and every time I go on a show, is maybe your superpower is that you can use a flathead screwdriver and it never slips out of the screw that you're screwing in. It's a superpower. It's maybe more useful if you work at IKEA, but that brings up interesting questions, which again is why even though a child can play Branch Riders, kids as young as 8 have played this. It's not a kid's game. It's literally for new players, veteran players, because you could create a world in which only the privileged have superpowers, falling on the whole legacy bloodline thing, or it could be only the rich are able to afford to train their kids on power, so they're the only ones who are actual superpower people. And then we've thrown in the whole idea of Cakebook, which is a social media app that kind of holds everybody in line because you're kind of more worried about likes than anything, because it's also the Heights also borrows a little bit from Mystery Men, in that superheroing is very corporatized.
I could also see a bit of Tiger and Bunny.
Yes, very much. I actually have a cap from Tiger and Bunny. But yeah, we ask questions like, if you're in the borderland, I mentioned that they're all creatives. Well, maybe you have a town where no one creates. Why does no one create? The benefit of our realm guides, because each realm has its own guide in the book, and we give you a background on the realm, and then we give you a fleshed out starter setting that has its own history, notable people, notable locations or places, notable events. And again, going back to one of my old school favorite sourcebook games ever, Shadowrun, specifically first, second, and third edition, I loved how almost every sourcebook had story starters. That, if you're in this realm, what could be an adventure that you're going on? So each realm has all of that, as well as 6 sampled light monsters. We put 1 boss, 2 enforcers, and 3 minions into every chapter. So you pretty much, your players are picking the genres they like to play their characters, pick the genre that they want to play and run an adventure in. We give you everything that you literally open up the book, make characters, you're off and running. We wanted to provide people with as much as they could right out of the gate. But with that flexibility, I really do envision in the future, we're already funded on Kickstarter, so we know the game's getting made. I'm already looking at, I want to see user-generated content. I want to see what people come up with, because already in our playtests, we've seen so much creativity out of these settings that at first, when we wanted to put 8 different settings, 8 different genres into one game, people were like, are you nuts?
Well,
you realize what that
you're a game designer. That's redundant.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there is a wealth of what can you do to make this truthfully yours at the table, and we really feel that the combination of the multi-genre storytelling with the background of what Branch Riders are and how they got started, that whole idea there, there's a lot of room for creativity in this, because that's another trend that we know about most RPGs. Not a lot of people use tons of modules. People homebrew a lot of what they do, so
nobody plays Uno as written.
Yeah, exactly. So there's whole tons of sections in the book that are going to guide you through that process, and it's very easy. So.
What would you be shooting for as far as a page count?
We're looking roughly, we haven't figured out final art to add to the count, but we're looking at roughly around 250 pages for the final book. And it'll be a standard size book, like a 8.5 by 11.
And what are you shooting for as far as a release window? Not a date per se, but a ballpark.
Summer 2025, to let everyone who may be interested, is when this drops, we'll probably still be in the Kickstarter, I'm not sure. It goes till July 11th, and the book is at this point 97% done. And by that I mean the system is written. We've been playtesting it for 3.5-4 years. So the book is done. There's very little that we're perceiving of adding, and we haven't gotten really any feedback that lends us to like want to change anything. So all we're looking at this point is layout and art. That's all that we need to do. So summer 2025 is, I will say that's a kind estimate. We're shooting for under that. Obviously, everybody is. And then who knows if it is successful and people start to really gig to it. We already have some ideas of writing some realm expansion books, like a source book to kind of deepen it, maybe even create another realm. Because people are like, well, what about Gothic Punk? I don't know. You can make your own realm. There's nothing saying you can. You know, you bought the book, it's yours. Do whatever you like with it. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for there. Because at this point, on the day of our Lord, June 25th, 24, we're about a little under $400 away from our second stretch goal at 10,000. We were fully funded in less than 8 hours. Which is awesome. We have a very low price point. If you're into just PDF only, the game is only $25 to back. And what it'll contain is, if you're a grandpa like me, or if you just like, physical copies of books, what it'll contain is you'll have the PDF, but there will be a coupon to order a POD copy through DriveThruRPG, which is how we're eventually going to have the game up. So there will be physical books for those that want them. And it's roughly about the same amount when you factor everything in to what you would normally pay for a book on a Kickstarter. But we just know a lot of people are riding with, PDFs these days, so we wanted that to be kind of our entry level. And there are special levels to the Kickstarter. If you like this idea of blights or power or gifts, and you're like, man, I want to make a blight to go into the book, that's a level you can back on. You can have an NPC name in the book. You can make your own gifts that will go in. You can even back at special levels that if you are a professional, there is a level that allows you to learn how to use the system if you're using it for education or therapy purposes. And that'll come with continuing education units. So if you're a counselor or a therapist out there, that's a level that, you'll get many things for your backing, and it really helps the process along. And there's a special level we call the Play It Forward, where you basically back at $45, and that not only gets you your copy of the game, but it also sends a copy to a nonprofit that does work with children or teens. So it kind of covers getting the game into other people's hands. So far, we've unlocked the stretch goal for printable backer t-shirts from Redbubble, like they did with Pugmire and a couple of the other lines. Mm-hmm. Our next goal that we're, again, very short from finishing is the exposure tracker. We want to take it from being just a simple printable PDF for the table. We want to actually make like a purchasable, orderable, like cardboard stock exposure tracker that will sit in the middle of the table with a slider that allows you to kind of, toy with where that's going to be. And good news, sorry if I'm going on too long of a tangent here.
No worries, tangents are what I expect in the temple.
Awesome. So one of the cool things about backing really any Onyx Path Publishing, they are not only our publisher, but they were also with us on the design process. Eddie Webb of Pugmire, all the realms of Pugmire, Eddie's worked on tons of games. Eddie was actually part of our design team as well. So there's a lot of experience in the RPG industry going into this game. And if you back now, you already will have access to the players section draft chapter, the chapter with the entire list of gifts in it. Next, this Friday, the 27th? 28th. I know days. You will get the GM draft chapter, and then the following week, folks will get a sample realms chapter. So our goal is by the end of this Kickstarter, you will have everything that you need to play this game until the final product comes out. So that way you can also check it out. And hey, admittedly, certain games aren't for everybody. So if you go ahead, check it out, you find out it's not for you, no harm, no foul. Thanks for stopping by. But we do know a lot of people, especially a lot of the playtests that we had at Origins, we had very, very positive reviews. Folks said that our resolution mechanic felt like PBTA but felt smoother, which I took as a really very nice that was a very nice accolade to get that whole compelling, the 7 to 9, thing. They felt that ours was a little bit smoother, and they liked the way a lot of the mechanics and the worlds really did work with each other. So yeah, it's kickstarting now. We are backing for 5,000, and we're already encroaching on 10, and we still have about 2 weeks to go. So we're very, very hopeful for a good end. And like I said, then we'll just get to work on getting the art, which is being done by Gong Studios. They did a phenomenal job on the art. And yeah, we're just looking to get it out to people as fast as possible, but make it as great as it possibly can be. And like I said, hopefully look for some other Branch Riders adventures and maybe some added stuff to the game in the future. We have some thoughts and ideas, but we're not quite ready to publicly reveal those yet.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Well, with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here. And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure on my end to be here as well, like I said, and I don't detract this statement at all. You're a fantastic interviewer. You ask great questions. You don't throw it in any particular direction. And as a small company, we're, again, Bodhana's a nonprofit that does therapy and education groups who felt that they could make a good game for therapists. We're small. Any type of help getting the word out about what it is that we do, and specifically with our first ever Kickstarter, which has been very well for us. Thank you so much for helping us to spread the word. And we're probably going to do late backers as well, so you can still kind of get in on it, to a certain level, because, it's PDF. How hard is that to do? So, yeah, thank you incredibly much, Mildra.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll look forward to seeing how things develop. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.